Yeah, welcome back from that break. And before the break, we were talking to Ray a little bit about aspirin and what it does to help you in a heart attack situation. Aspirin's also a very good pain reliever. It's been on the market for years and years and years. But I encourage people that are going to use aspirin for pain relief that you not take one and not even two, but you take 3 aspirin. 3 aspirin is about 1,000 milligrams. Once you take 1,000 milligrams of aspirin and it gets into your system, hopefully it's the enteric-coated version, that aspirin actually, it turns into a 12-hour medication. It actually exceeds the liver's ability to break it down. And it turns in what they call zero-order kinetics, which means it basically, it somehow delays its own metabolism, so it turns into a 12-hour pain reliever. So 1 or 2 aspirin is not the way to go, but 3 aspirin if you're looking at pain. Obviously, it's going to affect your clotting parameters. It's going to affect your blood. It's going to make it really thin. You're going to bleed quite heavily with aspirin. Also, if you're taking aspirin for your heart and you're taking a non-steroidal like ibuprofen or drugs like that, then those have a tendency to interfere with the aspirin's decrease in clotting. There are some studies that suggest that they may actually increase clotting parameters. In fact, that was the reason drugs like Bextra and Vioxx were actually removed from the market. Very complex explanation, but they did relieve more of the pain than they did the harmful effects of non-steroidals, such as ibuprofen and Motrin, which are not selective. And what those drugs did was they inhibited a substance called bradykinin. Bradykinin administers pain, but they also inhibit prostaglandins. And your body makes good prostaglandins and bad prostaglandins. The good prostaglandins maintain your stomach lining and they maintain renal blood flow. So if you're taking Motrin, it inhibits the good, bad, doesn't care. If you were taking Bextra and Vioxx, it was more selective for the bad prostaglandins, but left the good prostaglandins alone. So that means it maintained your kidney blood flow and maintained your stomach lining. The downside is that it made your blood thicker. So therefore, the increased risk of heart attacks came from people whose blood were more likely to clot. So with that being said, that's why those products are on the market. Now, Celebrex was kind of in the middle, so it really didn't affect those clotting parameters as much as it could, but that's what that was all about. So we have Chuck on the phone. Chuck.
Hey, Doc. There's an article today that really pissed me off.
Okay.
It's about the FDA, my favorite criminal organization.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a thing called CBD, apparently, cannabidiols that are associated with marijuana. And, the people into the natural medicine claim it really does a lot of good. It's found in hemp oil and extracts, things like that, sold in natural food, health food kind of places. Mm-hmm. At any rate, the FDA has now proclaimed that they are under, let me read it here, that they're being investigated as a new drug. And as such, they've sent notices to all the health food places to prohibit them from selling it because it's being investigated as a drug. And of course, this means that they're turning over the rights to it to Big Pharma. Mm. So the people that have used hemp oil, et cetera, are now getting screwed as always by the FDA, mm-hmm. who of course are the hitman for the Big Pharma. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On the good side, I guess there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that basically rejected a lawsuit against Colorado by its neighbors in Utah or Oklahoma and Nebraska, who were filing a lawsuit against them because they're allowing marijuana to be sold as a recreational drug was infringing on their borders.
Oh,
and
wow.
So they filed a suit to try to get them to stop it, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. They didn't reject the lawsuit, but at least they threw it back to the other courts. Hmm. So that's it. I'll leave it with you, but I'm pissed off. That FDA's got to go. That's
Well,
the only answer to the future of medicine, isn't it?
well, and unfortunately, you raise so many interesting points about the pharmaceutical companies and what they've done, and how they've just the cost of medicine has gone through the roof, and a lot of it has to do with the price of drugs today. I mean, it's sad what they charge people for products and how cheap it is if you go to foreign countries to get that, and how that's just allowed to exist. And you're right on the CBDs. A lot of the healing properties I think of marijuana and cannabis comes from the CBDs. The THC, if I'm correct, is the part that simulates, the high, but the CBDs actually do a lot of the healing parts that are involved with that. So, and I thought that Nevada just passed some law that allowed people to grow hemp and things of that nature, which I don't know much about it, but somebody came in my office talking about they were issuing a license to grow that, which was different than growing marijuana. So it makes sense that they're progressing in that direction because they want to, Big Pharma, doesn't want to let the local public get something over the counter that may have some other medicinal properties. But that's a very interesting twist because that means that somehow somebody out there is realizing that maybe there is something to this whole cannabis thing, and maybe that it can help people in a lot of different ways, and certainly I've seen it. I used to be somewhat skeptical of that. And of course, I think it's true when you get into research. Can you really believe everything that you read? Do people really? I mean, people can alter research and alter the data sometimes the way they do it, and sometimes they're never exposed. And some of these things can have disastrous effects on the community. And what about all the complications of all medications that are started in Europe and come over here? All of a sudden they find all these problems and people are dying. So, I don't know, the FDA didn't remove a drug of Andia from the market because it probably did affect the clotting properties and some of the other drugs now. So I don't think you'll see the FDA removing drugs from the market. I think what Big Pharmacy has done now is created, when they bring a new drug to market, let's say Xarelto, they know it's going to increase bleeding problems. They know it's a side effect. So they just create this big pool of money that, 1-800 bad drug, and then all the lawyers have to do is now submit, case data to and have it litigated in court that this really is a cause and effect, and they just pull money from that big trust fund. So it just means you and I and everybody are paying for the unfortunate, side effects, which are part of that reason. Never mind the fact that you didn't take care of yourself and you were a smoker or a drinker and all this other stuff, and you did things to an excess, and now you have some bad disease, and there's a medication out that can help you, but you have a side effect of the medication. Now you're going to sue the pharmaceutical company because you had a side effect of medication, which if you didn't take, you were going to die anyway. That just doesn't quite make sense. And I'm a firm believer that moderation is the key to just about everything. And if you eat too much steak, as they do in Venezuela, they die young of heart attacks. If you exercise too much, you're going to have problems from that. So everything's got to be in moderation. I mean, our bodies are unbelievably resilient organs, combination of organs, and we can take a lot of stress in different places, and we can deal with it. Place too much stress in one place for too long, and then systems break down, and then one system breaks down, another system breaks down, and another system breaks down, and that causes a catastrophic failure, which I tend to see quite a bit. So. Thanks for that call, Chuck. I really appreciate you scouring the news, which I never really have much of a chance to get a chance to do, and I appreciate you informing the public of these things. So we were talking a little bit about more aspirin and aspirin-related products and nonsteroidals. Again, so be careful when you're taking nonsteroidals such as Motrin, ibuprofen. They recently used to say you had to alternate those drugs with Tylenol, but now you can actually take them together. That's been a new finding that's been out there. I like Tylenol for degenerative arthritis. It works in a different pain recognition system than the ibuprofens, but ibuprofens are good for inflammatory disease. I always err on the side of taking as little of a drug as possible. I don't like prescribing 800 milligram Motrin because you obligate yourself to taking a large dose. How do you know that 800 is going to work when you might get around with 400? And if you're taking 400 3 times a day as opposed to 800 3 times a day, you're going to have a lot less chances for side effects on your kidneys and your stomach and developing an ulcer. Once you develop an ulcer in your gastric tissues on ibuprofen, it's almost impossible to retake that medication because your stomach lining has been denuded, meaning being thinned, and it doesn't really come back as well as it should. There is a drug called misoprostol. It's a 100 microgram tablet. It's very useful for people who have a lot of gastritis. Does seem to help prevent some of the gastric lining issues that happen when you take nonsteroidals. Its side effect happens to be diarrhea. So if you take too much, you are going to get some gastric problems with that. So, and I hope that when we come back from break, we got another few callers that are calling in. I know the Grove is open, so if you're a caller out there and you've been to the Grove and had a good experience, or possibly a bad one, I don't know. You might want to call in and share that with the viewers. I know they were crowded when they opened up. Hopefully I can get them on the show soon, and we can talk about all the neat things they have there and how they can help you pick out the source of medication which might be able to be helpful for you. And with that, we're going to go to break, and we'll be right back. Thanks.